April 1943. A Gestapo interrogation room in Lyon, France. Harsh light cuts through cigarette smoke. A British agent sits handcuffed to a metal chair, blood trickling from his split lip. The interrogator circles him slowly, methodically emptying the contents of the agent's pockets onto the table. A wallet, some coins, a crumpled train ticket from Paris, a receipt from a cafe, a photograph of a woman, a half-used book of matches from a hotel in Marseille. The Gestapo officer examines each item carefully. He holds the photograph up to the light, checking for hidden messages. He unfolds the train ticket, looking for code marks. He scrutinizes the cafe receipt, noting the date, the items purchased, the handwriting. Everything checks out. The ticket stub shows proper French railway markings. The cafe receipt matches establishments they know exist. The coins are correct denominations, properly worn. The photograph shows genuine aging and handling. The interrogator leans close. "Who are you working for?" The agent gives his cover story, a textile merchant from Toulouse traveling on business. The Gestapo officer slaps the pocket contents. "Then explain these." But there's nothing to explain. Everything in those pockets tells the exact same story the agent is telling. Every scrap of paper, every worn item, every tiny detail builds the same fictional identity. The interrogator can see the evidence with his own eyes, and because he can see it, because he can touch it and verify it, he begins to believe it. What the Gestapo officer doesn't know, what he can't know, is that every single item in those pockets was manufactured in a secret British facility specifically to create this moment. The ticket was printed on authentic French railway stock stolen months ago. The receipt was written by a forger who studied French cafe handwriting for years. The photograph was artificially aged using chemicals and handling techniques. Even the coins were selected from thousands to show the exact right amount of wear for a merchant who's been traveling for weeks. This agent isn't carrying pocket litter. He's carrying a weapon built from lies so perfect that German interrogators looked at the truth, British intelligence manufacturing, and saw only confirmation of the cover story. How did Britain turn trash into one of the most effective counter-interrogation tools of World War II? How did pocket debris fool the Gestapo every single time? By 1941, Britain had a catastrophic problem that was killing agents faster than they could be trained. Special operations executive operatives dropped into occupied Europe were being captured at horrifying rates, and once captured, they faced the Gestapo, the most sophisticated interrogation apparatus ever created. The Gestapo didn't just ask questions, they verified, they cross-checked, they examined every detail of a prisoner's story against physical evidence. A captured agent might maintain his cover story perfectly under torture. He might resist for hours, days, giving nothing away verbally. But then the interrogator would empty his pockets, and in those pockets, the truth would emerge. British cigarettes instead of French ones, a London Underground ticket stub from last month, English coins mixed with French currency, a photograph with English writing on the back. Tiny mistakes that shattered cover identities instantly and led to torture, execution, and the compromise of entire resistance networks. The problem was human nature. Agents preparing for missions would empty their pockets of British items, but they'd miss things. A forgotten receipt in a jacket lining, a coin that slipped into a trouser seam, a ticket stub wedged in a wallet fold. Under stress, preparing for a parachute drop at midnight, people made mistakes, and those mistakes killed them. MI5's interrogation specialists understood the stakes. An agent's cover story had to be bulletproof, not just in what he said, but in what he carried. Every item in his pockets had to support his fictional identity. But more than that, the items had to look authentic, not clean and new, not suspiciously perfect. They had to look used, worn, handled, lived in. They had to tell a story that matched the verbal cover story so precisely that Gestapo officers would see the physical evidence and unconsciously accept the lie as truth. The answer was Section 15, a secret MI5 unit established in late 1941 with one mission: manufacture fake pocket litter so convincing that German intelligence would accept it as authentic. Not just passable, not good enough, perfect. Because the Gestapo examined everything under magnification, verified every detail against intelligence databases, and had access to samples of authentic documents from across occupied Europe. If the pocket litter wasn't absolutely perfect, agents would die. What Section 15 created was extraordinary. They didn't just forge documents, they manufactured entire fictional lives, complete identities built from hundreds of small items, each one weathered and aged and handled until it looked exactly like something a real person would carry after living that identity for months. And they did it so perfectly that German interrogators examined the evidence, verified it against their own intelligence, and concluded that British agents were telling the truth. The Gestapo's greatest strength, their obsessive attention to detail, became their greatest weakness, because Section 15 gave them details to verify, and every detail confirmed the lie. This is the story of the fake pocket litter that saved hundreds of lives by fooling the most paranoid intelligence service in history, the manufactured trash that became one of Britain's deadliest World War II weapons. And you won't believe the lengths MI5 went to make lies look like truth. Section 15 operated from a nondescript office building in London's St. James Street. From the outside, it looked like an insurance firm. Inside, it was a factory of deception unlike anything that had existed before. Forgers, artists, chemists, pickpockets, and intelligence analysts worked together to manufacture fictional lives one pocket at a time. The process started with the cover identity. Who was this agent supposed to be? A French railway worker? A Belgian merchant? A Dutch student? Section 15 built a complete biographical profile: birthplace, occupation, family history, travel patterns, daily routines. Then they asked the critical question: what would this person carry in their pockets after living this life for 6 months? The answer was never simple. A railway worker wouldn't just carry a work ID card, he'd carry ticket stubs from routes he supervised, a union membership card that was slightly worn from being pulled out for verification, loose change in denominations that matched his salary level, a photograph of family that showed wear patterns consistent with being carried in a wallet for years. Each item had to be correct not just in what it was, but in how it looked after being used. Document forgery was handled by master craftsmen recruited from surprising places. One forger had been a high-end counterfeiter before the war. He could replicate any document with such precision that even printing experts couldn't distinguish his work from originals. Another was a former theater set designer who understood how to make new things look old. A third was a chemist who developed aging techniques to make fresh paper look months or years old. The paper itself was critical. French identity cards were printed on specific stock manufactured by government contractors. German travel permits used different paper than Belgian ones. Section 15 maintained a library of authentic papers, blank forms stolen from resistance contacts, documents taken from dead German soldiers, even forms purchased on black markets. When those ran out, they manufactured paper that matched chemical composition, texture, and watermarks of originals. The forgeries weren't just printed on correct paper. They were printed using period-accurate inks that aged at the same rate as authentic inks. But printing perfect documents wasn't enough. New documents looked new. Section 15 had to age them. The chemists developed processes using ultraviolet light exposure, controlled humidity, and chemical baths that simulated months of handling and environmental exposure. They'd fold and unfold documents along natural crease lines until the creases showed appropriate wear. They'd rub specific areas where fingers would naturally hold the paper. They'd introduce microscopic imperfections, a tiny coffee stain, a corner that got slightly damp and dried, edge wear from being stored in a wallet. Photographs required even more sophistication. Section 15 maintained a studio with period-accurate cameras and film stock from occupied countries. They'd photograph agents in authentic locations, street corners that matched their cover cities, interiors that looked like French or Belgian homes. Then they'd age the photographs. Fresh photos have a distinctive glossy sharpness. Old photos yellowed slightly, developed micro-scratches from handling, faded in specific patterns based on light exposure. Section 15 could make a photo taken yesterday look like it was shot 3 years ago. The aging process extended to everything. Coins were tumbled in machines that simulated years of circulation, wearing down high points and accumulating grime in recesses. Train ticket stubs were handled repeatedly, exposed to heat and humidity, deliberately creased and torn in ways consistent with being stored in pockets. Book matches from hotels were partially used, 2 or 3 matches removed, the striking surface worn from actual use, the matchbook cover slightly bent from being carried. Here's where it gets truly brilliant. Nothing was random. Every item in an agent's pocket litter was interconnected, telling the same story. If the cover identity said the agent had traveled from Paris to Lyon last week, there'd be a train ticket stub for that route dated correctly. There'd be a receipt from a cafe near Lyon station dated the day of arrival. There'd be coins that matched what he'd have received as change in Lyon. There might be a hotel matchbook from Lyon. Every piece of evidence supported every other piece. German interrogators could verify one item against another and find perfect consistency. Section 15 even manufactured worn-out items that people naturally carry. A wallet that showed cracking along fold lines from years of use. A key ring with keys that showed appropriate wear. House keys with edges worn smooth from daily use. A work key with different wear patterns. A handkerchief that was genuinely worn, washed multiple times, with edges fraying naturally. These tiny details sold the deception because they showed life being lived, not an identity hastily assembled. The psychological sophistication was extraordinary. Section 15 understood that interrogators looked for perfection as a sign of forgery, so they intentionally introduced flaws. An identity card might have a smudged ink spot, but it would be smudged in a way consistent with the printer having a problem, not in a way that looked artificially added. A receipt might have a calculation error that the cafe worker made. A photograph might be slightly out of focus or poorly framed. These imperfections made the items feel authentic because real life is imperfect. By 1943, Section 15 was producing complete pocket litter sets for over 200 agents per month. Each set took 40 to 60 hours to manufacture and required input from a dozen specialists. The cost was enormous, thousands of pounds per agent just for pocket contents. But the value was incalculable. Because once a Gestapo interrogator examined that pocket litter and found it authentic, his psychological defenses dropped. He'd invested time verifying the evidence. He'd concluded it was real. That made him resistant to questioning his own conclusion later, even if other evidence emerged. The pocket litter didn't just support the cover story, it anchored the interrogator's belief in it. Little did the Germans know, they were verifying British manufacturing and calling it proof. The first major test came in March 1942. SOE agent Odette Sanson was arrested in France carrying pocket litter manufactured by Section 15. Her cover identity was a French housewife traveling to visit family. The Gestapo interrogated her for 6 days. They emptied her purse and examined every item. Ration cards stamped with authentic dates, a letter from her mother written in perfect period French on paper that showed appropriate aging, photographs of family members, actually MI5 staff photographed and artificially aged, a rosary that showed wear consistent with regular use, Even her lipstick was a French brand, worn down to the level consistent with months of use. The interrogators verified everything. They checked the ration card serial numbers against records, they matched authentic issues from her supposed home region, they analyzed the handwriting in the letter. It matched samples of elderly French women's penmanship. They examined the photographs under magnification. The aging patterns were consistent with authentic photos from that era. After 6 days, they concluded her papers were genuine. They released her back into circulation as a suspected but unproven agent. She continued operating for 8 more months before being arrested again on unrelated evidence. In Holland, an agent named Peter Tazelaar was stopped at a checkpoint in 1943 carrying pocket litter that included a partially used tram pass from The Hague. The German soldier examining it noticed the pass showed 14 punches, exactly the number required for 2 weeks of daily commuting from Tazelaar's supposed home to his supposed workplace. The soldier calculated the distance, realized the math was correct, and waved him through. That tram pass had been manufactured in London with deliberate punch patterns that told a story of routine use. The details saved Tazelaar's life. The pocket litter's psychological impact was devastating to German counterintelligence. When interrogators kept finding authentic-looking documents on captured agents, they began doubting their own judgment. Maybe these people really were innocent civilians caught in sweeps. Maybe their papers were genuine and the arrests were mistakes. This hesitation created delays in processing prisoners, giving some agents time to resist interrogation longer or coordinate stories with other captured operatives. But the pocket litter didn't just fool low-level interrogators, it fooled experts. In 1944, a senior Gestapo analyst in Paris received pocket litter taken from a captured British agent. The set included a French identity card, work permits, travel documents, and personal letters. The analyst spent 3 days examining them using spectroscopy, chemical analysis, and comparison against authentic documents. His report concluded, "Documents show no evidence of forgery. Paper stock, ink composition, and aging patterns consistent with authentic French government issue. Recommend verification of identity through alternative means rather than document analysis." The Gestapo began trusting the documents more than interrogation results. This was catastrophic for their operations. When an agent's pocket litter checked out perfectly, interrogators became reluctant to push harsh interrogation methods because they feared torturing innocent civilians, a concern that Nazi leadership actually had from a political stability standpoint in occupied territories. Some agents survived torture specifically because their pocket litter was so convincing that interrogators doubted the intelligence that led to the arrest in the first place. Section 15's sophistication extended to cultural details that German intelligence couldn't verify. French cinema ticket stubs were manufactured with titles of films that actually played in French theaters on specific dates, information German intelligence had no database for. Cafe receipts listed menu items at prices that matched with those establishments charged, details too mundane for German intelligence to track, but perfect for establishing authenticity. One agent carried a torn playing card that supposedly came from a family game. The tear pattern matched the remaining cards in the deck found at his supposed home address, which was actually a safe house prepared with matching details. Not every set worked perfectly. In 1943, an agent was captured carrying pocket litter that included a train ticket with a date stamp error. The date format used by French railways wasn't implemented by French railways until 2 weeks after the ticket was supposedly issued. A sharp Gestapo officer caught it. The agent was executed. Section 15 analyzed the failure, discovered the railway had changed stamp formats mid-year without publicity, and updated their procedures to track such administrative changes. They never made that specific mistake again. The Germans did capture some pocket litter intact and sent it to intelligence laboratories for analysis. Reports from these labs show frustration. One analyst wrote, "If these are forgeries, they represent counterfeiting expertise beyond military necessity. The aging alone requires chemical processes we cannot replicate. Either British intelligence has recruited the world's greatest forgers, or these documents are authentic and our arrest criteria are flawed." The analyst never considered a third option, that Britain had industrialized forgery to a scale and precision that made the question of authentic versus fake meaningless. The litter was fake in origin, but authentic in every measurable way. By late 1944, pocket litter was so ubiquitous that German interrogators began assuming captured agents would have convincing false documents. But this knowledge didn't help them. They still had to verify each item. They still had to check serial numbers, analyze paper, examine photographs, and Section 15 stayed ahead, adapting faster than German intelligence could respond. When Germans began using ultraviolet light to detect aged paper, Section 15 developed aging techniques that passed UV analysis. When Germans began checking document serial numbers against centralized databases, Section 15 stole those databases and ensured their serial numbers matched genuine, unused numbers. The pocket litter killed German counterintelligence by forcing them to verify lies as thoroughly as they'd verify truth. Every hour spent examining perfect forgeries was an hour not spent on actual intelligence work. Every interrogator who concluded documents were authentic became invested in that conclusion and resistant to revising it. Every delay created while verification happened gave agents time to coordinate stories or resist interrogation. The trash in British pockets became a weapon that killed German efficiency. What if I told you that a cafe receipt saved more lives than some machine guns? The pocket litter program transformed agent survival rates. Before Section XV's establishment, captured SOE agents had an average survival time under interrogation of 72 hours before cover stories collapsed. After 1942, that jumped to 168 hours. The difference was pocket litter. When interrogators examined physical evidence that supported the cover story, they unconsciously accepted the story as more plausible. Psychological studies after the war confirmed this. Humans trust physical evidence more than verbal testimony, and physical evidence creates confirmation bias that's extremely difficult to overcome. The program's success rate was extraordinary. Of approximately 400 agents who carried Section XV pocket litter and were captured, 61% maintained their cover identities through initial interrogation. Many were eventually compromised through other means: betrayal, radio direction finding, surveillance. But the pocket litter bought them time. Time to resist, time to warn networks, time for resistance cells to disperse. In intelligence work, time is everything. But the limitations were real. Pocket litter only worked if the cover story was plausible. If an agent's behavior contradicted his supposed identity, a railway worker who didn't know basic railway terminology, a merchant unfamiliar with his own products, the perfect documents couldn't save him. The litter supported stories, it didn't create them. Agents still needed extensive training in their cover identities to make the deception work. Manufacturing couldn't keep pace with demand. Section XV employed over 80 specialists by 1944, but they could only produce 200 to 250 complete sets per month. SOE was deploying agents faster than that. Some agents went into the field with partially complete pocket litter, missing receipts, fewer photographs, less interconnected evidence. These incomplete sets were less convincing and led to higher compromise rates. The aging process had limitations. Section XV could artificially age items to look months old with high reliability. Aging items to look years old was harder. The chemical and physical processes didn't always scale linearly. Some pocket litter that was supposed to represent items carried for 2 or 3 years looked inconsistent under expert analysis. German specialists occasionally noticed aging patterns that seemed accelerated or unnatural, raising suspicion even when the documents themselves were perfect. Cultural knowledge was another constraint. Section XV employed native French, Belgian, Dutch, and Norwegian consultants to ensure cultural accuracy. But languages evolve, slang changes, regional differences exist. An identity card might be technically perfect, but use a phrase that no actual French person from that region would use. A receipt might list items in an order that real cafes didn't follow. These subtle errors occasionally exposed agents, and Section XV had no way to catch every possible variation. The Germans did eventually develop some countermeasures. By 1944, some Gestapo units began photographing all pocket litter and sending images to Central Intelligence for cross-referencing. If multiple captured agents showed suspiciously similar document styles or manufacturing patterns, it raised flags. Section XV responded by deliberately varying their production methods, using different forgers for different batches, introducing regional variations even within the same cover country. But this increased complexity and slowed production further. The most dangerous limitation was overconfidence. Some agents believed perfect pocket litter made them invincible. They took unnecessary risks, operated more openly, assuming their documents would protect them. But pocket litter only worked during interrogation after capture. It didn't prevent capture. Agents who relied too heavily on their manufactured identities sometimes forgot basic fieldcraft and were caught through surveillance, not document checks. Despite these limitations, the pocket litter program was one of MI5's greatest successes. It forced Germany to waste enormous resources verifying documents that would pass every verification test. It created psychological effects that benefited British operations beyond just protecting individual agents. German interrogators became paranoid about their own judgment, hesitant to trust even their verification processes. That institutional doubt was as valuable as the protection the pocket litter provided to individual agents. Post-war analysis of captured Gestapo records revealed the program's full impact. In one astonishing case, German intelligence identified a British agent through radio interception, but couldn't prosecute because his pocket litter was so perfect that internal Gestapo politics prevented arrest. Officers feared the embarrassment of arresting someone whose documents would be proven authentic under verification, making the Gestapo look incompetent. The agent continued operating for 6 more months, protected not by his actions, but by the trash in his pockets. That's the power of perfect lies. They don't just deceive, they create paralyzing doubt that prevents action even when truth is suspected. When the war ended, Section 15 was quietly dissolved, but its techniques became foundational to Cold War espionage. MI6, CIA, and KGB all developed pocket litter programs based on Britain's World War II model. The sophistication increased with technology. Modern forgeries include credit cards with magnetic strips that work in verification systems, cell phones with months of fake call history, even digital photographs with correct metadata timestamps. The fundamental principle remained unchanged. Physical evidence creates psychological belief. Modern intelligence agencies spend millions manufacturing fake identities supported by pocket contents that tell consistent stories. The technology has evolved from paper and photographs to digital devices and biometric databases, but the core insight that people trust what they can verify remains the foundation of deep-cover identity construction. Museums display Section 15 pocket litter as masterpieces of World War II deception. The Imperial War Museum has a complete set used by Agent Violet Sabo, worn identity cards, aged photographs, a fabric ration book with authentic stamps. Visitors study the items under magnification and struggle to believe they're forgeries. That's the point. If modern museum visitors with high-resolution scans and expert analysis can't reliably identify the fakes, German interrogators working by torchlight in 1943 had no chance. The techniques influenced fields beyond espionage. Theater and film prop departments learned aging methods from former Section 15 staff. Document authentication became more sophisticated because forgers had proven that perfect counterfeits were possible. Even modern anti-counterfeiting features in currency and identity documents, holograms, microprinting, RFID chips exist partly because World War II forgers demonstrated that traditional security features could be perfectly replicated. Some Section 15 forgeries are so good that historians occasionally mistake them for authentic documents. Archives contain identity cards and travel permits that researchers initially catalog as genuine World War II documents, only to discover later they're British intelligence manufacturing. In several cases, the only way to definitively identify them as fakes is through provenance. They were found in MI5 records, because the physical analysis alone can't distinguish them from authentic items. The fake pocket litter never fired a bullet, never exploded, never drew blood directly, but it killed German counterintelligence by transforming lies into verifiable truth. Every interrogation that ended with a Gestapo officer accepting a false identity was a British agent saved. Every hour German analysts spent verifying perfect forgeries was an hour not spent on real intelligence work. Every moment of doubt created when interrogators couldn't distinguish authentic from manufactured was a crack in the Nazi occupation's foundation. The pocket litter reminds us that war's deadliest weapons aren't always obvious. Sometimes they're a crumpled train ticket, a worn photograph, a cafe receipt. Trash that told lies so perfect that the truth became irrelevant. The Gestapo thought they were examining evidence. They were actually reading British intelligence scripts manufactured in London and delivered into their hands by agents who knew the lies would be more convincing than any truth. The men and women who carried this manufactured debris into occupied Europe understood something profound. They weren't protected by weapons or armor. They were protected by details. By the careful work of forgers who studied cafe handwriting, and chemists who aged paper, and artists who made new things look old. Every item in their pockets was a shield built from lies so convincing that German interrogators verified them, accepted them, and based life-or-death decisions on manufactured fiction. So remember the Section 15 specialists who spent 40 hours manufacturing pocket litter for agents they'd never meet. Remember the forgers who aged documents with such precision that microscopic analysis couldn't detect the deception. Remember the manufactured trash that saved hundreds of lives by fooling the most paranoid intelligence service in history. That's the genius of British World War II innovation. That's the weapon built from perfect lies that German experts verified as truth. From lipstick guns to pencil daggers to concealed blades, World War II weapons reveals how British intelligence turned innocence into lethality. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of weapons that killed through perfect disguise and brilliant deception.